For my artist statement, I decided to make a video and talk about each piece that I decided to put into my portfolio and talk about what inspired me to write them and how they changed as I revised. And at the end, I'll answer questions about my writing. My first poem was about my cat Elliot, and here's a picture of Elliot. The original poem I wrote was really short and had really short lines with really short stanzas, and as I revised the poem, I added more details about what I did with my cat when he was still around, and I also decided to make the lines longer but the stanzas shorter because the poem seemed to flow better when read out loud. The second poem I wrote was called At My Coffee Shop, and it was inspired by the coffee shop I used to go to in high school. I would go after school before volleyball practice and attempt to do my homework with my friends. The coffee shop was called Four Seasons, which is why in the poem I talk about the different seasons. I actually only talk about winter and summer, but usually I spent all 4 seasons at the coffee shop. As I revised the poem, I added extra details and words that made the poem longer, and it seemed to make the poem better as well by adding more description, and it gave the reader a better overall sense of the coffee shop and what was going on inside and outside. The third poem I wrote was called From the Back Seat, which was inspired by this picture. The reason I chose that picture was because my family goes on a lot of road trips, and I'm always very cramped in the back seat. Here's a picture of my very cramped back seat. The original poem I wrote I actually didn't like very much, so with revisions I added a lot of different lines and changed up the tenses a little bit. So now the poem's a bit different and I like it a lot better. The first short story I wrote was called I Like Coffee and Jew, and it was actually based off of the same coffee shop that I wrote about in At My Coffee Shop. The main character of Emma was actually based off my friend Victoria, and here's a picture of Victoria. And Lucas was based off of Luke, who worked at the real-life coffee shop, and he actually did date Victoria, but they don't have any pictures together because their relationship didn't last long enough to have any pictures together, just like the relationship of Emma and Lucas in the story, but here's a picture of Luke. As I revised the story, I realized that the first one I wrote really didn't have any details about the character of Ryan, so I added more details about Ryan and Emma's relationship, and I also changed up the ending a bit to make it more interesting. The second short story that I wrote was called The Life of a Hairdresser. I was thinking one day about how I need to get my hair cut, and then I began to think about how when I do get my hair cut, that the lady doing it always asks me about my life, but we never really seem to talk about her life. So I thought it would be interesting to write a story about the hairdresser's life. As I revised the story, I changed up the character of Artis a little bit, and I changed the ending so it focused more on Nicole's abusive relationship instead of just her relationship with Artis. Now I'm going to answer some questions about my writing. I do most of my writing in my bedroom, which is where I am right now, and you can kind of see the things I have on my walls, which I stare at while I write, sometimes for inspiration, but mostly just for distraction. And when I write, I usually like it to be really quiet, and I sometimes don't play music, but when I do play music, it's something calming like this.
Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these broken wings and learn to fly. All your life you were on.
My favorite part of the writing is probably the revision process. I like to take people's opinions and use them to make my stories better, and I usually like the result a lot better than I do the first time. My writing has always been very short and to the point, and as I evolved as a writer, I learned which details would add to the story and make it more interesting for the reader to actually read, instead of just adding fluff details that aren't necessary to the plot at all. I view my audience as mainly my friends, like my roommate or my high school friends, and I'm not really sure why, but it's probably because they're the ones that inspire my stories the most. So most of my stories are actually aimed towards them. If I could write anything, it would probably be a CD full of songs that I had written with my own lyrics, because I really like when I can find a song that directly relates to my mood at the time, and I think it would be really cool if people could relate to the songs that I had written.
Blackbird fly, black